It's lovely to be here, Aubrey. Lovely to see you. So Dafina and I arrived late today because we spent the day yesterday watching the funeral. And it was very moving, actually, for those who weren't able to watch it. I thought it was extremely well done. This brings us to a story about the Longevity Forum, which is the focus of Longevity Week. The Longevity Forum was started by Andrew Scott, author of The 100-Year Life, Dafina, who's here, and myself, about 5 years ago, to really cover all the aspects of longevity in a week of sort of meetings centered around London and Oxford. And it's going to occur in November of this year. If anyone's interested, I'm not advertising, I just want to tell you a story about it, which is last year's recipient of our Longevity Personality of the Year was a man called James Lovelock, that some of you may be familiar with. And James Lovelock, was 102 years old when he received the award. He was the inventor or proponent of the theory of Gaia, which, as you know, makes him one of the first and most important environmentalists ever to have lived. And this year, on his birthday, the Longevity Forum sent him the warmest wishes for the future. It was that very same day that, unfortunately, he expired. This year, we tried to find a new recipient of the Longevity Personality of the Year, and the prize is an enormous egg timer. It's a huge egg timer, very useful for meetings that you want to cut short, and also for boiling eggs and things like that. And Dafina came up with the idea of sending the award to Her Majesty the Queen. And so we received a polite response back about a week ago saying Her Majesty didn't like to accept private awards. And so she never got her large egg timer. So if anyone's got any great ideas as to who we should send the award to this year, please let us know. And I think we were all disappointed in the Queen, actually. We were disappointed because she only made it to 96. Now, her mother made it to 102, and her husband made it to 99. And I think all of us in this room, given that longevity is increasing and will continue to increase and will increase exponentially as a result of all the work that's being done in this room and elsewhere, it was sad that she only made it to 96. However, 96 is a fairly common age now. In the United Kingdom, there are over 600,000 people today who are in their 90s, forget about being in their over 100. And in the United Kingdom and the island of Ireland put together, there are 14,500 centenarians, which contrasts with a mere 12 in 1917, when the King of England came up with the idea of sending birthday telegrams to the people who are over 100. So there has been a remarkable transformation, as we all know, in the demographics of aging. But there's also, I think, in the years since I wrote my book, Juvenescence, about 6.5 years ago, been, I think, a sense that although there's a lot of good stuff happening, that we haven't made very significant progress. And I think we have to accept that there's that sense out there, and there have been failures, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit in my talk today. But we also have to recognize that actually we are on the cusp of a major, major revolution. And it's that revolution I want to to address from a high level today, since I'm not a scientist, and just how excited I am, we are at Juvenescence, and many other people in this industry are, about the prospects over the next decade or so, notwithstanding the fact that perhaps in the last few years, it appears that we've stalled on the science front, even though we actually haven't. So the first thing is the state of the longevity industry, our progress, development, and of course, failures. And we at Juvenescence have had our own failures as well, which I'll talk about. Everyone, the big investment banks, serious analysts, futurists, consulting companies, agrees this is going to be a huge industry. They don't know what the components of that industry will be, although glimmers as to how that might work out are appearing. And we've seen some of the companies today. Phil, as usual, did an excellent rendition of what the key paradigms in the industry are. And I thought Michael from Humanity was extremely interesting in the way that digital health will work, and for that matter, DDA as well. Those are some of the talks that I caught earlier on. So it's going to be a very big industry. We know that some things are going to work. We don't know exactly what's going to work yet, but we're inching our way towards there, and I can see more and more pieces of the jigsaw coming together. So it appears that on the surface, not much is happening, but underneath, the swans and the cygnets are paddling furiously, and it's that paddling that I think in the next 5 or 10 years will result in truly stupendous news that will be broadcast in forums such as this and the Longevity Forum, etc., over the next decade. One of the things I found very interesting was that recently there was a symposium in Copenhagen that many of you, I think, would have been to, that expanded the hallmarks of aging, added 5 new hallmarks to the established, or the so-called established 9 hallmarks. And I thought that was interesting because that represents progress since the year 2012 when the first 9 hallmarks were introduced. It's only in 10 years that 5 new verifiable important hallmarks have been added by scientists. And that sort of incremental increase in the knowledge of longevity, which will be one of the keys, along with the flood of money that's coming into the industry, to the success I'm talking about over the next 5 or 10 years. Now, this industry is not just important for all of us in this room because of our passion and our desire to see people aging healthily. It's an imperative for humanity. It's an imperative for humanity because if we have huge numbers of old people who have to be looked after, who are incapable, who are suffering from all the diseases of aging, and yet live very long lives, then we are in serious, serious trouble. Basically, this picture of a middle-aged person looking after 2 elderly parents is the future if we don't do something about the syndrome of aging right now. And I'll just give you an example. So in China, in 1950, there were 7.5 children under the age of 15 for every person over the age of 65. Today, that figure is 1.5 kids under the age of 15 for every person over the age of 65. And by the year 2050, and almost nothing can be done to alter that, given China's disastrous one-child policy and I wouldn't say disdain, but the fact that most people in China don't want to have any children, let alone one, that figure will be 0.5 kids under the age of 15 for every person over the age of 65. Now, if those people over 65 are all going to be suffering from comorbidities and getting frailer and frailer, yet living to possibly 100 and beyond, then we are in a very disastrous situation. So it's an imperative for us as scientists, you guys as scientists, for me as a financial sort of proponent of this industry and a starter of companies, to do something about this. And so we have to double down, accelerate our efforts. Otherwise, we are going to find ourselves in a very serious situation. And the big problem in this world is not overpopulation, it's the depopulation of many, many countries that's going to happen at a very, very rapid rate. In Japan today, there are 125 million people. By the year 2100, there'll be less than 50 million people. Singapore's population is going to halve in the next 40 years. The population of Hong Kong, Spain, France, etc. will also decrease very dramatically over the next few years. So this is a very serious situation. So from an economic imperative, a social imperative, and also from a fundamental humanitarian imperative, we have to do something about this situation. But invention is a slow process. We have to take into account, our aspirations are not always matched by our achievements. And, in the last 6.5 years, I've seen multiple failures in aging. Some of those failures lead to pointers for the successes that we're undoubtedly going to be having. But you have to have a lot of patience, you have to have a lot of capital. Now, it is the case that sometimes people who invest very early might as well not do that because it's almost as useless as investing in the wrong thing. Because if you're far too early into something, then you can lose your money. But it's also the case that optimists tend to make money and pessimists tend to lose it. So we should be pragmatically optimistic, but take into account that this is going to be a difficult situation. Now, sliced bread was only invented as an example, 30,000 years after the invention of bread. Sliced bread only happened in 1928. Can you believe that? The steering wheel only was invented and introduced into cars 8 years after the first car appeared on the road. And this was one of what really amazed me, was that can openers only appeared 48 years after the invention of the can. So I was thinking, what happened to cans before can openers came out? And literally, they used hammers and chisels to open cans in the early days of cans. So patience is a real virtue in this, but we obviously have to be impatient as well, because we are, all of us, getting older. Our parents, our friends, our relatives, and everyone that we care about is getting older. And the world needs something to be done about the fact that healthy aging is a social imperative. Unfortunately, there have been failures, and those failures have cost our industry. Let's face it. The problems at Restore Bio, where Rapalog was being developed, and it appears that the trial was badly shaped. The problems at Unity Biotech, which everyone here is familiar with. The problems at Fox Bio, which still is, I think, a juvenescence company, where we killed it early. You've got to fail cheaply in this industry, otherwise you can lose an absolute fortune. And the problems at Sensei, which was the first spin-off of another major longevity biotech company, are well known. And those problems, unfortunately, are what biotech is all about. It's just the way it is. It's a binary industry in many cases, which is why we've got so many bets and a variety of places. And you fail sometimes. But it's a shame that we haven't had one remarkable success yet, although I can see those successes coming quite soon. Despite that, as Phil eloquently put it, there is a lot of money coming into the space. And this is a slide that I've actually stolen. An imitation is the best form of flattery, Phil, in case you're thinking of suing me. I've stolen this from Phil, but I want to talk about a couple of the companies in this industry. Obviously, Altos is the big talked about one. Phil talked about it being venture capital led. I think that's a sort of hybrid venture capital and rich person led company based in Cambridge. Calico we all know about. We don't know what it's doing, but we know that $3.5 billion have got into it. Evolution, and Mahmood is a friend of mine and a co-founder of the Longevity Biotech Association, was here earlier today, and they're putting $1 billion every year for the next at least 20 years into longevity science, which is fantastic, and it's philanthropic. We've raised about $250 million. Apollo, as you know, has raised nearly 200 million, and Life and Cambrian have raised substantial amounts of money as well. And obviously, there are many other companies as well that could be mentioned in this field. So there's a substantial amount of money coming in, and money is fuel for scientific progress. Whatever anyone thinks, without money, nothing progresses, especially in the kind of setup that we have today, which is a setup where there's a regulatory burden on biotech companies that is quite significant and can slow up the process. We're still living with an FDA that doesn't understand yet how epigenetic clocks, as an example, or biomarkers could be used to speed up the process of drug development, doesn't understand how AI and machine learning can be used to speed up the process of drug development, and is still, in some ways, or definitely improving, rooted in the FDA of the thalidomide period, when they started to slow down the process of drug development to the point where only about 40 new compounds are introduced to the market every year. That needs to change, and I'm optimistic that we see some evidence of that, although it's not fast enough. Big Pharma, as Phil said, are paying attention to this industry, but they're not paying attention sufficiently. The Big Pharma is not really research-driven. and this is a generalization, I know, a wide generalization, but nonetheless it's true. Big Pharma has become more of a marketing and sort of distribution machine. A good example, of course, is Pfizer and BioNTech. You know, Pfizer did not develop their COVID vaccine. BioNTech did, and they went into a 50-50 joint venture, and Pfizer made a ton of money, some of which will be coming our way in the next month or so, I hope, and I'll explain about that in a minute. AI and machine learning is extremely interesting, and of course you're familiar with these companies that I'm putting up here, like Exscientia, Recursion, and in silico. Maybe not so familiar with Relation, but it has to be pointed out that Exscientia and Recursion have both raised $1 billion of capital over the last 10 years and are only in relatively early stage trials on their compounds. So it's not necessarily the extremely fast accelerant that we were hoping for or they were hoping for when they started up. However, I feel that the progress in AI and machine learning is such that we will see an acceleration. We will see a sort of galloping catch-up by these companies over the next few years. We were the first investors into in silico medicine in 2017, and we sold our stake quite well, actually, relatively recently. And we sold it because in silico's graduated from being a longevity-focused company to being a broad platform drug discovery company, and we're obviously a longevity company. And so we now put our hope and faith into a company called Relation, which has recently done a significant up round and brought in some fairly large venture capitalists, including Khosla, which you're all familiar with, and Magnetic Ventures from Silicon Valley. I also want to add my own view that quantum computing, which is rarely talked about in fora such as this, is going to be extremely important in the development of new molecules and the speeding up of drug discovery in almost every way. And there's a company called Cambridge Quantum Computing, now known as Quantinuum, which I'm very close to, and the founder of that company is a very good friend of mine. Cambridge Quantum Computing is the largest single, in both Ireland and in the UK, the largest single unicorn now, which is incredible. It started about 10 years ago and recently was valued at about $35 billion US dollars. So it goes to show that you know, you can start companies in the right area and do extremely well. And I'm very excited about what quantum can do. Whatever machine learning and AI can do, quantum will both accelerate it and exceed it vastly. And anyone who's got passwords or any interest in the blockchain or cryptocurrencies, watch out, because within 18 months, the current systems that are used by them will be upended by quantum. So there are some later stage trials which are directly related to aging. Well, not a lot of them, but there are some. Our own company, Ligenesis, is in phase 2 trial at the moment for organ regeneration. This is to basically replace failing livers with new liver tissue introduced by way of hepatocytes into ectopic lymph nodes adjacent to the failing liver. And in 400 animal models, including large animals such as pigs and dogs, there hasn't been a single failure. And we are super excited about that. And coming up behind that is, of course, replacement of the thymus, potentially replacement of kidneys, and replacement of the pancreas. And there are ongoing animal studies in those areas at the moment. And you've got Mitotech engaged in cell therapy for dry eye disease, as an example. You've got BioAge, which is a super company working with a repurposed small molecule for unexplained anemia in aging, and you know, a variety of other companies. So there are some companies that are fairly advanced in their trials, but there are as yet not a lot of them. And then, of course, we've got the proposed repurposed therapeutic interventions, and I will bet at least some of the people in this room are taking at least some of these. So we all know that metformin, near Barzilai, is a good friend of mine. We're still waiting for the TAME trial. I don't know if it will ever happen, to be quite honest. I hope it does. We know about rapamycin, and I know that some people self-administer rapamycin. The problem there is the dose. and you've got to be very careful about the dose. We know that the self-administration of senolytics, I'm very bullish on senolytic drugs, we just haven't got the right one yet. So people are taking darsatinib and quercetin as sort of home therapies. Clotho we're very interested in, and we are engaged in investing in that area. And then we have our own PA1 inhibitor that will be doing is doing IND enabling studies and should be in the clinic sometime at the end of next year, which we're very excited about. So there are repurposed therapeutic interventions that we're all familiar with, and I wrote about them 6.5 years in my book, Juvenescence. So really, I can't say that a lot has happened in this area for repurposing, but there is some progress being made. And then, of course, as Phil said, cellular reprogramming is super exciting. Mike West, my colleague at Ajax, Juvenescence is the principal shareholder in Ajax, is very excited and talked very eloquently about that today. There's a lot of money coming in here, and there's a lot of excitement and opportunity in this. But again, we know that something's going to work. We just don't know what exactly is going to work. So watch this space. There was a gentleman earlier who talked about the work of Michael Levin. Morphoceuticals is a Juvenescence company, as you may or may not know, using bioelectric tissue stimulation to regrow digits in a frog, which is something that shouldn't happen, but it is happening. And of course, you can think about it may sound like science fiction, but it is here and now, and it's the sort of thing that could be used, for instance, by the US Department of Defense, DARPA, to regrow limbs in wounded soldiers or in industrial accidents or some such stuff. So although it appears that it's years away, it's actually a remarkable technology, and I suggest, it's been featured in all these news media, I suggest that if you're interested in it, you should look it up. And the gentleman was quite right when he asked about Michael Levin. This is groundbreaking technology, and we have, I don't know if it's been announced yet, but it doesn't really matter, it's not a public company. We've recently done a significant up round in that with venture capitalists as well. I mentioned organ regeneration. This is incredible, all right? At the moment, a liver transplant, which is the only solution for people with terminal liver failure, costs about $800,000 US. This technology will cost about $100,000. It's an outpatient procedure compared to a 15-hour plus operation, and it will save lots and lots of lives. So organ regeneration, the classic car replacement of parts, is here and now, and I think it's going to be absolutely revolutionary. But one thing it won't do is increase your lifespan. If your liver is replaced, you'll live just as long as you would have done with a healthy liver. So it's, in some senses, it's a pro longevity technology. In other ways, it's not going to extend average lifespans. And then you've got gene therapy, and you've got George Church coming on later on by Zoom, as I understand it. Mira GTX just opened its facilities here in the Republic a couple of days ago in Shannon, and Mira is a great company which is involved in gene therapy, very, very good business. Rejuvenate Bio is working on dog rejuvenation, something I'll talk about very briefly, as Phil has done, and other companies as well. And then, of course, there's the science-driven NutraPharma business, which is where they use grass components to produce consumer self-administered supplements. And we've heard about NAD, we know about resveratrol. We at Juvenescence have an absolutely foul-tasting ketone ester called Metabolic Switch. I think you either have to drink it with a pint of Guinness or an Irish whiskey. It's so disgusting. But the formulation is being worked on. Apparently, I've been promised there will be a better tasting one on the market relatively soon. It's on sale in the United States. And then coming up behind it, we have sulforaphane, spermidine, and this very exciting sort of stealth mode compound called longevity lipids. And from what I've seen, longevity lipids is something we'll all be taking with gusto, because it is absolutely remarkable. And as I said, it's science-driven, patented, and it will be available to consumers very quickly without the usual laborious FDA processes. And then the synthetic biology. Now, synthetic biology is not used at the moment to produce anything that's going to extend our lives, but it produces the key components. Its most near-to-market use is, of course, in foods, which is my other area of great interest in changing the food system so that we reduce cruel, intensive farming. And we're getting there, and synthetic biology is an area that we are very interested in and indeed have invested in. And then I'll talk about pets very briefly. Dafina and I have 7 dogs. We want them to live longer. We believe that ketone esters will add 25% to the average dog life because of the obviation of heart failure, which is the biggest killer of pets. And so our dogs will, once the taste becomes better, because they're very picky about what they eat, will be administered with this stuff, and we'll let you know whether it works or not. So Juvenescence is one of the leading longevity biotech companies. You know, there's a myth that it takes $2.5 billion to develop a drug and 12 years and so forth. Greg, Deck, and myself started a company 6 and a bit years ago called Biohaven. I say this just to show that you don't have to be negative, you don't have to worry about the cost. God will take care of it. We started this company, Biohaven, with $3.5 million. We owned 54% of the company. We own considerably less today. But it has the leading migraine drug on the market in the United States after just 6.5 years of starting a company with nothing to having the leading drug in a very large area of unmet medical need. And we just sold the company, and we will get paid in the next month or so, hopefully, 11.6, or the shareholders of Biohaven get paid $11.6 billion. So we expect to do even better in Juvenescence because this is a much bigger market. It has much bigger application, and we're super excited about what we can achieve. So we have some pipeline highlights here. We're not obviously disclosing everything that we're doing because some of the stuff is in stealth mode, but we're super excited. We were going to go public. Luckily, we didn't because there's been a nuclear winter in biotech, as most of you will be aware. But we are finalizing our last round before we go public next year, and we have had a very large check written for that last round. And we have substantial cash on the balance sheet still. So we see it as a remarkable opportunity. As I said earlier, we don't know exactly what's going to work. We know something's going to work. We know that we should all be invested in this. And we need to redouble our efforts because this is a humanitarian imperative. And so everyone who's here is doing their bit. And with a bit of this, we think we'll get there. So thank you very much indeed for listening. Who wants to ask a question? No one. Good. Don't ask me anything scientific.
We'll see. So one of the things I'm interested in is species differences in longevity and aging. Of course, this can be a big inspiration for ideas of treatments. For instance, Stephen Ostad's lab is studying the long-lived ocean quahog clam, which can live 500 years, and they found that the proteins are really resistant to misfolding, which could someday maybe help with Alzheimer's or something, but they don't yet know how they resist it. Do you invest in or have any companies or know of any companies that are studying species differences specifically?
I don't, but that is a really valid point. I suppose that you might say that the pet market is a species different industry, and that's where a fairly large amount of money, I think Phil had it down as $90 million so far, is going into, and we're obviously looking at that really carefully because exactly as Phil said, the shortness of their lives, the compatibility with us, the similar environment that they live in, and the fact that we'll spend any amount of money on pets gives it a major boost as a species comparison. But all of the stuff you said is really important, and I think that maybe someone should start a company around that. So maybe you. Maybe one more. Lady here.
What do you think is the role of philanthropy now?
That's another great question. I think that those of us who have money should do something philanthropically, and I think every company should look at their business from a philanthropic point of view. Now, obviously, they have shareholders, they need to make returns. There's a price for innovation. There's a necessity for return on innovation. But I think everyone that I've met in this industry, I know there are some charlatans out there, but I haven't met them. I think everyone is mission aligned to do good by patients, to do good by humanity. And that's one of the inspiring things about people such as yourselves who come to conferences such as this. It's a great question. Philanthropy has a very major role. I'm doing my little bit with my Center for longevity at Oxford. But anyone who's got any money in this room, and I know some of you have, you should be doing your own thing and your own, alma maters or whatever you hold dearly. Can I go? Thank you very much.